Hi everybody, I hope you're all well. It was kind of strange this first weekend of being completely blocked in the house. I hope you survived it. So in this first video, what I want to do is go through the answers to the homework that I set you last lesson. So the first thing that I asked you to do was to send me your writings. I haven't received any yet, so as soon as you've done them, send them to me and I'll mark them and send them back to you. The second thing that we wanted to look at was the exercise on the worksheet that I sent you. And then the third thing was the exercise from the book. So we'll start first of all by looking at the worksheet that I sent you. So I've disappeared now. I'm trying a different technique using my mobile phone screen. So let's see how this works. So the first was the exercise where you had to fill the space with the keyword, always using modal verbs need and be able to. So in the answer to exercise 1, you could have said, I have to, I must, or I need to take my tennis racket tomorrow. In question 2, don't need was the answer. You don't need to buy a ticket in advance. Number 3, haven't been able. So in the original sentence, they use the present perfect. It hasn't been possible. So in your answer, you also need to use the present perfect. So we haven't been able to watch TV. In question 4, so in the original sentence, I'm sure those gloves don't belong to Peter. So in your answer, they can't be Peter's because of the fact that he says, I'm sure, in the original sentence. Number 5 is simply, we should have phoned Granny. Number 6, again, I'm sure our new neighbour is famous, and so we need to say our new neighbour must be famous. It's called logical deduction. In sentence 7, my phone might have fallen out of my bag. Okay, remember a past modal form. It's saying it's possible, so might have fallen. And in number 8, when I was little, I was able to, because was able to is the same as I could, can in the past. Okay. Now the next exercise, which was exercise 4, very, very simple. I really hope you didn't have any problems with this one. So you should have had number 1, that might be Johnny's coat, but I'm not sure. Number 2, you can play volleyball with us if you want. Number 3, we should have caught an earlier bus. Number 4, there's nobody at home, so they must have gone out somewhere. Number 5, you shouldn't give people advice you don't follow yourself. And number 6, you can't take that rucksack into the museum. It's not allowed. Okay, so those were the answers. Moving on to the next exercise on the page, which was common phrases for use of English, part 2. So what I'll do is I'll just show you here the answers, and then in a moment on the next slide, I'll give you an explanation, some synonyms for some of the expressions. So just take a moment to look at the answers. So if you look at the answer to number 1, it was apart from, and what I've written here on this slide is also except for, because that's a synonym for apart from. So you could say apart from Paolo or except for Paolo. Okay. In the Question number 2. I started cycling to school in order to save money. Of course, you could simply use to instead of in order to. So, for example, I started cycling to school to save money. Okay, I've moved on to number 5 because number 3 and number 4 were nothing particular to say in this case. Number 5, my mum said I can invite up to 25 friends. Now, in this case, up to is obviously, like you'd say in Italian, fino a. So we'd use it because we're describing a quantity of people. Now, you know that fino a in Italian we can also translate as until. The difference here is when we're speaking about a time or a date, for example. I normally sleep from 9 o'clock until 7 o'clock, for example. Or my cousin is staying with me until the 6th of January. Okay, so just be careful of these two different uses. Let's continue with, sorry. Question number 6. So this was the structure either or in English. We can choose to go either to an art gallery next Friday or to the botanic gardens. Just be careful that in English we don't say or like you do in Italian. It's always either or when you're giving an alternative. In number 7, we all have to help at home by doing jobs such as, so in this case you could substitute such as with like to give the same meaning. Finally, in number 8, we had Tara is a good friend of mine. Remember that when you're speaking about a friend of mine, you always need to use the possessive pronoun. So in this case, a friend of mine, but if you're speaking about another person, she's a friend of yours, she's a friend of his, ours, theirs, etc. Sorry. So moving on now to the exam task on the same page, you had to complete each space with a word. So, of course, the example 0 was the eatery was founded by, which we're using a passive form. So when we describe the agent, we always use by. Question number 1. The children got bored quickly and were unable to sit still for longer than a few minutes. So remember, longer is a comparative structure, always followed by than. Okay. In number 3, it's a phrasal verb. So John and Patricia came up with the idea. Remember, the phrasal verb to come up with in English means to have an idea or to have a plan, to invent something. We've seen this in the past, I think. Number 4, came up with the idea of opening a unique restaurant that would be fun for both adults and kids. Number 5, after spending months planning it. Here, pay attention to the fact that when you have the word after or also the word before, if there is a verb, it's always in the ing form. Okay. Number 6, the waiters are dressed as if they were engineers. In the next slide, I will explain to you a bit more in depth how we use as if. Okay. Number 7, the restaurant has become one of the most popular in Chicago. And number 8, people travel there from all over the city as well as, so you were missing well, The expression as well as means in addition to. Okay. Now, I said to you before, I just wanted to look for a moment at the structure as if. We also use in English as though, and they're synonyms. You can use them in the same way. Now, if you use as if to describe a real situation, you'd use a normal tense. If you look at the example here, let me show you. They, or the children, look as if they are happy. Okay, we're speaking in the present. We're speaking about now. Another example. It looks as if it's going to rain. Okay, we're speaking about a normal future, so we use the form going to. The difficulty, let's say, is when we use as if to speak about an unreal situation. So when you're speaking about an unreal situation, it's similar to the second conditional in that you have to use the past. So if you look at the example from your books, from the previous exercise, question 6, we had the waiters are dressed as if they were engineers. So we're speaking about a present situation. The waiters are dressed now, but it's not a real situation because they're waiters. They're not, in reality, engineers. And so we use the simple past to express the idea of an unreal situation. Another example, we could say, I don't know, if you're talking to your mum or your mum is talking to you maybe and you have no idea what she's saying, she might say to you, "What's wrong? You're looking at me as if I had two heads." Okay, so she's speaking about a situation now, but it's not real because obviously you don't have two heads. Okay, so I hope you understand the explanation that I've given you for this one, as if or as though. Okay, so what you can see now are the answers to the homework on page 38, which was the exam task, the reading task. So if you have a look here, you can see I've written the correct letter. So looking at number 1, the answer was D. His two interests, he's a fan of music and of writing, and his career is a journalist. Number 2 was B. She speaks about, he, because it was Haruki, children who have a talent but need encouragement. Okay, 3 was C, because she says, she speaks about necessary to be constantly learning new techniques. Okay, number 4 was A. Again, she says she didn't know whether she would be good enough at writing. Number 5, he says it's a way of losing myself in a fantasy world. Number 6 was D. He says, I just came up with the idea I could be a journalist. Okay. Number 7 was B. B, because he says, I'm not inspired by successful artists, but those who are driven and determined. 8 was C, Eleanor, because she says, I didn't realise I could do it as a job. Number 9, A, because Laura speaks about how it is no bad thing to be a bit different. And number 10, it was D, Joel. Let me see, this one says they come across successful people who look down on others. Because in the final line, you come across some people who are very arrogant because they feel they are better than the rest of us. Okay, so I think you'll agree that this particular exam task was easier than the one that we saw in the mock test. What this exam task does contain a lot of are phrasal verbs, and in the lesson that I'll be posting tomorrow, we'll be having a look at some of these phrasal verbs together. Okay, I hope everything was clear. If it wasn't, then get in touch with me and I'll try and clarify your doubts or your questions. Okay, bye for now.